Hello and welcome to our next episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Moore, your host, and I have with me today Martijn Dullaart from ASML and also the chairperson of the IPX Congress. Martijn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So Martijn, of course, I've read a little bit about you and have read your blog on mdux.net a couple of times, but for our viewers, can you just share a little bit about yourself and your background and how you've ended up so passionate about configuration management?
Sure. It's already a while ago. It actually already started during my master's at the university. During my thesis, I was already focused a little bit in the area of PLM, where the automotive industry was finding ways to collaborate with one another and having information distributed instead of centrally stored. So that was one of the first things where I got into that game of product lifecycle management. And when I then started at that time, it was still called Atos Origin Consultancy Company. I worked in implementing mostly eMatrix from Matrix 1 at the time, now Enovia, and done that for a while. And then I moved to Philips Consumer Electronics to extend their homegrown PLM system. They had a system where they could manage engineering changes on engineering bill of materials and product documentation around it, but they lacked a manufacturing bill of material to able to support multiple manufacturing locations, as well as ways to communicate to their suppliers via a portal, and also the service bill of material and the change management around that is something that I was responsible for at Philips. And then a little bit later, Philips decided to basically consolidate their PLM and wanted to move to one system and more harmonized processes across the company. And that's when Change and Configuration Management program was born. And that was basically the first time I was really introduced into configuration management. Before that time, it was mostly product lifecycle management. During that time, we struggled a lot with speaking the same language about configuration management, about also product lifecycle management. And in 2012, I hope it doesn't go away in the screen, but there it is. Let's do it like this. So this is the book that I bought in 2012 from Vince Guess. It's a CM2 for business process infrastructure. And he's the founder of CM2, basically. That book got me triggered on CM, especially CM2, which is a little broader than the normal CM standards that you have out there. And I think that that was the ignition for 2013 to invite Ray Wozni, who's currently the CEO of IPX. He trained us in 2 weeks in March 2013, and then another week in April of 2013, a large team of people on CM2, and that really energized us because this is what we were looking for. All the puzzle pieces fell together, and it helped us create a language. But not only that, it also gave us the tools to come up with the solution, because it's not just describing for us what you need to have in place, but also how to do it. And that was really, really helpful. And from there, I basically moved on to ASML, where I'm responsible for improving configuration management at ASML.
That's very cool. And of course, through your blog, I've learned that you provide a lot of mentoring opportunities and lecture at universities. Before we get too much deeper into the topic of configuration management in CM2, can you just tell our viewers, what is that?
Yeah, so a lot of people think of CM or configuration management as a lot of administrative work, boring, old people doing that kind of stuff, not a lot of fun, and it's nothing like that, because to me, CM is one of the core foundations of any company. You can't do without proper CM. or if you're not willing, if you're willing to spend a lot of resources on corrective actions, feel free to not do CM properly. But if you want to have those resources work on innovation, on new ideas, on creating better products, then you need to do CM properly. And CM is about, for me, and not just about identification of the things that you find important to have under change control, to plan your configurations, and to be able to do status accounting on your configurations and do verification and audits. But if you look at CM2, it looks a little bit broader. It's not like the old mill standards that you have out there on configuration management. It looks, I would call it enterprise configuration management.
Mm-hmm.
So it also takes into account all information that can impact, like safety, security, quality, schedule, cost, environment, but also the reputation or the brand recognition of a company. And I think what is strong about CM2 is the way they can accommodate change. And I think that's one of the most important things of configuration management, is the accommodating of changes, because you want to be able to do that fast mm-hmm. and efficient. If you have your processes, the way you structure information, and the way you organize yourself around your product development and the changes around that, then you can be very fast and efficient. Otherwise, you become sluggish. You have to wait on people. You have to get a lot of signatures. You are creating a lot of additional administration, and that's not what you want. You want to be fast and efficient. And I think that is, I think, for me, what CM2 is about. And I think one of the mantras of CM2 is change faster, document better. And I think that's really the core, the heart of it, of what is CM. And that's, I think, why a lot of people don't understand it really well yet. Mm-hmm. But if you look at configuration management, it's basically every function in a company has something to do with configuration management in the end. And as configuration management, we are responsible for the integrity of all that knowledge, all that configuration information that we have in our companies, to make sure that it is available on time, and that it is correct, and it's controlled, and not just blindly put in a repository for everybody to use. And that's, I think, what CM is for me.
So you actually said quite a few things there that a company should really expect to gain: better brand recognition, better innovation, faster speed, higher quality, less changes downstream. Like, it sounds like there's so much.
Not necessarily less changes downstream, actually. Because now I'm going to be nitpicky on this one. So okay. What you want a lot of changes.
Okay.
But you want the right changes.
Okay.
You want changes to be valuable. You want every change needs to add value to your bottom line and to your customer's bottom line. Mm-hmm. And if you are good at processing changes, then the more the better. But today, in a lot of companies, a lot of changes are not improving that value. They are fixing a mistake.
Okay.
And fixing mistakes is a corrective action.
Right.
You should have prevented by doing it right the first time. And that's, I think, what I think is important to recognize, because a lot of managers think, I need less changes. I need just group them together, make them big. No, don't make changes too big, mm-hmm. because we all know the bigger the change, the harder they fall. And we need to make sure that we can accommodate those changes in an efficient way. And then a smaller change is easier to process quickly than a very big chunk. And so I'm trying to always say, change more, but smart.
I like
that. Do
the
right things.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right that a lot of companies have this misconception about it being difficult because it is well documented, but the two are not mutually exclusive statements. So with that, what are some first steps that a company can take to get started with CM2?
Train. If you are not well versed in configuration management, you need to first gain knowledge. You have to get that knowledge from the right place. So for me, the right place was at IPX, the CM2 trainings. I think I did all of them, at least all the CM2 trainings, some even twice already. And I'm still learning today. I'm still taking on those course materials at least once a week to search for something, find and try to understand how certain things are and how I should apply it. But I think if you want to train, you have to spend the time to do proper training. And for me, CM2 is a really good model, and I think that that would be a very good starting point for every company. And don't just train one person in your company, because that's not going to work. You need to have a workforce that, to various degrees, understands what CM is about. So maybe some managers need a 2-day course, but people that are implementing and improving your processes, they need to go all the way. They really need to understand from front to back what CM2 or CM is about, because if you don't, it's very difficult to implement something. And my journey is now already about 8 years underway, at least for around CM2. And it takes a long time to really understand what it is about. It's the first time we were trained and I read the book, it resonated. But that's not the same thing as fundamentally understanding all those principles and being able to apply them and implement them. That takes time, and you make mistakes, and you have to correct those mistakes, because there's so many dependencies to all kinds of other processes from all kinds of different functions, and you don't have all the knowledge by yourself. I grew up in the PLM world, mostly from an engineering perspective, moving forward to manufacturing servers. When I joined ASML, I got the opportunity to work in the configuration management department that was reporting to supply chain management. So I got more a supply chain view of the world of CM, which opened up my eyes, also completely different. Also the way the products that ASML makes also gives a flavor to CM. So where CM2 is a generic model, you still have to interpret it and apply it in your specific situation. And it's possible. I mean, the model is good and it's solid, but you still have to make make it fit like a glove.
Right. That makes sense to me. And at the beginning, you showed a book that is one of your favorites, and of course, IPX and the training that they do. What are some other resources that you would recommend for somebody that's either just starting out with CM2 or wants to take their practice deeper?
Well, so of course, IPXHQ.com is one of the first websites I should check out if you want to follow training, because they have the CM2 offerings. With the COVID Corona going on, they also have virtual sessions. And what I hear from people that already joined is that they really like also the interaction. Even though it's virtual, the interaction sometimes is even better than in a room.
Oh wow, that's great.
So I think it's even now it's a good time to get trained. They also have a Slack community that you can join. You can use my website, mdux.net. I have another website called cm-games.com, where I have published a open source configuration management game based on Lego bricks, which is always fun to do, especially if you want to have people giving a little bit of context about configuration management and how difficult it is. It's a fun game to do. And it also got the instructions for how to facilitate the game and how you need to set it up. Of course, you have the international standards like the SAE EIA 649, currently Ref C, which is an important configuration management standard. And so those are, for me, the main resources that I use nowadays.
Excellent, thank you. And kind of going back to the beginning a little bit, you had talked about how people think that configuration management, or CM2 specifically, is hard. What would you say are some other misconceptions about the topic, like why people would be hesitant to go in that direction?
I think that people feel that they will lose flexibility, that they will lose speed because of applying, for instance, a change management process. And while, of course, to a certain degree that might seem plausible, that it slows you down because you define a process with specific roles to facilitate that process, like a change leader or a change implementation leader, or a release and audit analyst. So you have those specific roles in CM2 to facilitate that process. And because you have those roles in that process, it is going a lot smoother than without those rules. If you just put in a process and you expect people to go through that process fast and efficient, it's not going to work. Why? Well, how often will an engineer go through this process? Is that 2, 3, 4 times a year?
Right.
Well, typically, if I have to do things 3 times a year, I'm looking up the manual to do it because I've forgotten how to do it. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes slow and annoying, and that's why you need people to facilitate that process and to make sure you don't lose the speed and can have the people, like an engineer, focus on the work that they have to do. And it's not just an engineer, because from a CM2 perspective, it's not changes are not engineering driven only, right? You have a whole lot of people in other functions like operations that also have to play a role in decisions about the change. And it's like it's a cross-functional team that is involved there, and you need to be able to facilitate that these people are talking to one another, sharing the impact and understanding that impact to come to a good decision. And even a decision for a change request not to execute a change and to reject the change is a good decision. And I think often people feel that they have to process every change. Every change needs to be approved. It's like sometimes I feel that people think it's a goal to get an approval on a change request. And to me, that's not the case. For me, the change request has its goal to create a good business case and a good impact analysis so that you can make a good decision. Mm-hmm. And a no or a reject is a good decision if the business case or the risk or whatsoever is saying that it's not a good idea to do, right? And then what you often see is that a lot of people try to manipulate the data to make it like look better than it really is. And then if you come back later and when you implement it, you don't get the value that you anticipated.
Right.
So that's why I think you have to do the right things, and that's making sure you do changes that add value, that improve the quality, that improve your capabilities on your product. And I think that's I think one of the key things that has to happen. And if you don't do that, then it becomes sluggish, then it becomes slow, because if you do changes that are risky or too complex or don't add real value, down the line you will run into issues and you have to correct those mistakes. And then it keeps coming back and it slows you down. And no engineer wants to work in an environment where they have to do a lot of corrective actions. They want to do new stuff. They want to innovate. They want to create the new next best thing. You don't want to work on stuff that's fixing a mistake. That's the boring part of your work, right? At least that's how I would be. I mean, I want to do the fun and new innovative stuff. I don't want to be part of it.
That definitely aligns. So you said a lot of really great things there. I like the fact that you keep tying the change back to value. And I love the statement, don't be afraid to reject the change, and really putting that focus on understanding the impact. How does CM help you ensure that you're doing the right impact analysis and that you're facilitating that process?
Well, first of all, you have to structure your information appropriately, have your proper identification of your items, proper linking of all your requirements and all your documentation and all the structures of information that you have. Even going model-based doesn't mean you don't have the need for structuring your information in a way that you can accommodate change. One of the challenges in the current state of model-based for me is that it doesn't take into account facilitation of change. It takes into account all the needs of an engineer to document information in a structured way, but it doesn't often take into account ways to maintain and update that information going forward and plan all those updates, because all that work needs to be planned, and it needs to be cut up into small chunks so that you can plan it, assign people that have to deliver it, so that you, in the end, deliver what has been asked. And today, what I often see in current tools is that is a very big challenge, and it has to do with the way they model the information, and especially if you look at if you put a lot of stuff in one model, is all that information maintained and owned by one person? If not, how can I, as CM, then identify which chunks of that model is owned by somebody else? And can I assign a small chunk to somebody else so that that person can work on it at the same time while somebody else can work on the other chunk?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if everything is tied to the same revision, that's not going to work.
Right.
So we really also have to think about how do we cut all that data into pieces that we can facilitate change optimally, because we want to do parallel changes to shorten the time to delivery.
Absolutely.
But to do that, we have to make those chunks be able to update in parallel without interfering. And that's, I think, one of the challenges in today's PLM world, in the model-based world, where there are some challenges to overcome, and which is logical, because the first focus on model-based is the engineer. And they are having requirements towards delivering value to their designs. But now comes in the change process and all the work we need to do from CM to support also downstream functions. Mm-hmm. And then it's there we are still in the early stages, I guess.
Excellent. So with all your knowledge and passion and advocacy for configuration management, are there any companies that you would say shouldn't use CM2?
Yeah, if you want to go bankrupt, I don't think you need CM. That's for sure. But even if you are small, if you're take for instance a startup company. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes a startup company doesn't use CM, and the moment they need it is when they are ramping up, and then they have a very small window to start applying it. And what happens then is they don't have the time to implement proper processes and proper tools. Mm-hmm. To do it. So what happens is they use an Excel file that goes around, and then you have to do a lot of corrective actions because things go wrong if you do it that way. So even in a startup company, and I know you're thinking, well, those people are focusing on getting a new product out. True. But spending a little amount of time on some basic principles. You don't have to do everything from CM, but you have some basic principles like identification, all those kind of things that you need. Mm-hmm. To be able to document your information properly. I think you need to have that in place in any company. And then depending on your needs towards when you grow, etc., you will get more needs to have better change control in place, status accounting in place to make sure you know what you are delivering and to where and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense to me. I would really love to see you write an article on that. Like, what are those foundational principles that even if you are a startup, you shouldn't let go, you know?
Yeah, so, well, good point.
So Martijn, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to share?
Maybe a final thought is that I think when implementing CM, I think the principles in itself are not overly complex. Mm-hmm. I think the most complexity is changing people's thoughts and behaviors. Mm-hmm. And there's, I think, nothing more difficult than changing people. So we talked about change management, and it was more in the context of product change management. But I think one of the most important aspects to also have as a skill set is organizational change management, and understanding how people will behave or react to these kind of changes, especially CM, because there is, by definition, a kind of adversity towards CM. Mm-hmm. And you need to be very understandable of those adversities and help people to understand what it will bring, not just to them, but overall to the company, but also towards your customer, because you will get better quality back, and it will earn itself back easily.
Martijn, that's a great point, because really at the end of the day, if your people don't embrace it and understand it, then they're not going to be executing it. So
exactly.
that's perfect. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you.
And to all of our viewers, if you like this content, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so you'll never miss another episode. And of course, if you have any questions that you would like to see answered on a future episode of Minerva PLM TV, either drop your comments below or send me an email at jmo@minerva-plm.com. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.